Yeah, it was just, I think I'm still trying to like get through that part.
Still to this day?
I try to give myself grace. Everybody says give yourself grace. It's so hard for me to do that. At the end of the day, it's my fault, and I let everybody down.
And that brings us to the broader perception forming among people who have been watching this situation unfold from the outside. Some critics are beginning to argue that the union leadership appears extremely sensitive to public disagreement. Every time a player publicly questions the official position or raises concerns about negotiation strategy, that criticism seems to disappear quickly. Observers have pointed to several examples over the past few months. When some players began discussing the complexities of revenue sharing publicly, those conversations faded almost immediately. When questions emerged about whether a potential strike could actually reduce the financial gains players were hoping to secure, the discussion seemed to vanish just as quickly. In a healthy labor organization, internal debate is usually encouraged. Union leadership often welcomes questions from members because those conversations help build consensus. Transparency can strengthen unity by ensuring everyone understands the strategy and agrees with it. But critics of the current situation argue that what they're seeing looks different. Instead of open debate, they believe dissent is being managed very carefully. Whenever disagreements surface, they seem to be addressed quickly and quietly before they can spread. That pattern has led some observers to question whether players feel fully comfortable expressing concerns publicly. Because if leadership appears to respond aggressively to criticism, members might become hesitant to speak up. Of course, it's also possible that leadership simply wants to avoid public division during an extremely sensitive negotiation period. Maintaining a unified message can be crucial when negotiating with powerful organizations like professional sports leagues. Either way, the sequence of events surrounding the Stewart and Plum letter has highlighted just how complicated the current negotiations have become. The players are fighting for a better financial structure and a stronger future for the league. At the same time, they are trying to maintain unity among dozens of athletes who may have different priorities and perspectives. That balancing act is never easy. And as the negotiation deadline approaches, the pressure on everyone involved continues to increase.
You said that you felt that you let down yourself, your family, your teams.
Yeah.
So how did you work through that, what you called this guilt that you were feeling?
I don't think I really gotten through all the way that I didn't let down, everybody in my family.
And this is the moment where the entire situation stops looking like a simple disagreement and starts looking like a much bigger turning point for the league. Because when you step back and look at everything together, the letter, the sudden reversal, the talk of strikes, the pressure building around the negotiations, you begin to realize that the WNBA isn't just dealing with a contract dispute. It's dealing with a test of leadership and unity at the exact moment the league is growing faster than it ever has before. The league is experiencing record attention. Television ratings have jumped, arenas are selling out in cities that used to struggle to fill seats, and a new wave of young stars has brought millions of new fans into the sport. Players like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Buchers have transformed the visibility of women's basketball almost overnight. That momentum should make negotiations easier in theory, because both the league and the players understand that the sport is finally reaching a much larger audience. But growth also raises expectations. When the spotlight gets brighter, every disagreement becomes more visible. Every internal debate suddenly turns into a public conversation. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. The players want a bigger share of the league's financial future, which makes sense given the rising popularity of the game. The league, on the other hand, is cautious about committing to financial structures that it believes could become unsustainable. So the negotiations have turned into a balancing act. Both sides are trying to secure their long-term interests without damaging the growth that's finally happening. This is why the messaging from union leadership matters so much. When players appear united, they strengthen their position at the bargaining table. When disagreements spill into the open, even briefly, it gives the league an opportunity to question whether the players are truly aligned on what they want. That's why the Stewart and Plum letter created such a ripple effect. It briefly exposed the possibility that not everyone inside the Players Association agreed on how negotiations were being handled. And even though the public message quickly shifted back toward unity, the moment still raised questions that haven't fully disappeared. At the same time, talk of a strike adds another layer of pressure. A strike is always a risky move in professional sports. It can create leverage, but it can also halt momentum and frustrate fans who have just started paying attention to the league in record numbers. So as the negotiation deadline approaches, both sides are staring at a crossroads. The players want progress that reflects the sport's growing popularity. The league wants stability that ensures long-term sustainability. Somewhere between those two goals lies a deal that could shape the future of the WNBA for the next decade. And the biggest question now isn't just whether a deal will happen. It's whether the players can maintain the unity they need to push their demands forward. Because in labor negotiations, strategy matters, money matters, timing matters, but in the end, unity is often the factor that decides everything.
That this person is not a female. Firstly, because this was actually posted to Brittney's personal Instagram. And when it comes to Instagram, they use a combination of like AI detection and plus manual surveyors, but specifically the AI detection to make sure that no explicit content ends up on the platform. So clearly whatever AI detection system was used when Brittney posted this and it stayed up for 106 weeks was not like, oh, this is a bare female chest, we have to take this down. It obviously assumed that Brittney was male.
Listen closely to the way the public statements were delivered afterward, because the wording itself tells an interesting story. When Breanna Stewart later spoke about the situation, she described Terry Carmichael Jackson as our executive director and emphasized that the players believed she was leading them in the best way possible. On the surface, that sounds like a straightforward expression of support. But people who follow negotiations closely immediately noticed the tone. The phrasing sounded extremely careful, almost like corporate language designed to calm a situation rather than express genuine enthusiasm. Statements like that are common when organizations are trying to manage public perception. They're designed to reassure outsiders that everything is under control. But when you compare that language to the tone of the earlier letter, the contrast becomes difficult to ignore. The letter reportedly questioned the entire negotiation process. It highlighted concerns about leadership decisions and internal communication. That kind of document suggests deep frustration. Yet only days later, the public message suddenly shifted to unity and confidence. Stewart even explained that the letter was never intended to undermine Jackson or create division among the players. But realistically, sending a 3-page formal complaint to the executive director during active negotiations inevitably creates tension. It signals disagreement. It tells the league that not everyone on the players' side is fully aligned. In labor negotiations, perception matters. If the league believes the union leadership is divided, it immediately weakens the union's bargaining position. Negotiations are often about leverage, and unity is one of the most powerful forms of leverage a union can have. Perhaps the most striking part of this entire sequence is how quickly the tone changed. Stewart explained that she and Plum had spoken directly with Jackson and other members of the executive committee after the letter became public. Apparently those conversations resolved the situation, at least publicly. Within 3 days, the narrative moved from internal concerns to a message of unity. But observers can't help noticing how fast that turnaround happened. Issues serious enough to warrant a formal complaint rarely disappear overnight. That's why many analysts believe there must have been intense discussions behind closed doors during that short window.
Brittney, let me see something real quick. Brick, thank you. Get the hell out of here, yo. Jab stepping, it's a brick. Swing and a miss. Oh! Yo, I ain't gonna fake it right.
The reaction from people who follow sports labor negotiations closely has been almost identical: confusion. Not disagreement, not outrage, confusion. Because the sudden reversal in messaging doesn't line up with how negotiations normally unfold. For years, analysts who cover these situations have watched unions and leagues go back and forth through negotiations. There's usually a rhythm to it. Concerns get raised, positions harden, statements are carefully crafted. But what happened here feels different. Breanna Stewart went from publicly questioning the direction of the negotiations to appearing in front of reporters during Team USA minicamp in Miami and fully supporting the same leadership she had just challenged days earlier. The internet noticed immediately. Social media users began pointing out the dramatic shift, and the tone of those reactions ranged from curiosity to outright skepticism. Some people joked that the video of Stewart speaking looked like a hostage statement. Others sarcastically asked if someone needed to send a SWAT team to check if everything was okay. Obviously those comments were exaggerated, but they captured the sense of confusion surrounding the moment. The timeline is what makes the situation impossible to ignore. On Tuesday, Stewart and Kelsey Plum, who hold leadership roles within the Women's National Basketball Players Association, co-signed a letter addressed to the union's executive director, Terry Carmichael Jackson. That letter reportedly outlined what the players described as serious concerns regarding how the negotiations over the collective bargaining agreement were being conducted. 3 pages of concerns is not something you write lightly. It's not the kind of thing someone sends if they simply have a minor disagreement about strategy. Formal letters like that usually signal deeper frustration within an organization. They often indicate that key figures believe the process itself might be flawed or that leadership decisions need to be reevaluated. And remember, this letter wasn't written during a quiet period. It came during one of the most critical negotiation windows in the league's history. The WNBA's future financial structure, revenue sharing model, and player compensation system are all part of the current CBA discussions. The stakes could not be higher. So when two of the most prominent players in the league formally questioned the negotiation process and then just days later publicly supported without hesitation, people naturally want to know what happened in between. Because something clearly occurred behind closed doors during that short window of time. Whether it was a meeting, a phone call, or internal pressure from other players, the sudden shift in tone suggests that intense conversations took place within the union leadership. And those conversations may have reshaped how the entire situation is now being presented to the public.
But we have heard nothing from the WNBA, absolutely nothing.
Brittney Griner elbowing Caitlin Clark in a crazy way and then calling her a trash white girl.
Now we arrive at what might actually be the most important part of this story. The letter that Stewart and Plum sent didn't just mention concerns in a vague or casual way. According to reports, it described what could only be interpreted as serious internal issues within the union's leadership structure. The document reportedly suggested that members of the executive committee were not fully aligned with each other during negotiations. That's a significant claim, because labor negotiations depend heavily on unity. When the group representing the players isn't speaking with one voice, it weakens their leverage dramatically. The letter also raised questions about transparency. Some players apparently felt they weren't receiving clear communication about what was happening in the negotiation room. That kind of uncertainty can create tension quickly. When athletes are being asked to support major financial and structural decisions about the league's future, they want to understand exactly what's being discussed on their behalf. There were also concerns mentioned about the overall process. Some players were reportedly worried that they might be pressured to support certain decisions without fully understanding the implications. If that's accurate, it would represent a serious breakdown in trust between leadership and the players they represent. These are not small procedural complaints. They go straight to the heart of how the union operates. Allegations of confusion, lack of transparency, and pressure during negotiations suggest deeper structural problems inside the organization. And the timing makes everything even more dramatic. The deadline for negotiations is approaching rapidly. At the time this situation unfolded, the league and the union were reportedly less than 72 hours away from a critical point in the bargaining process. Deadlines like that increase pressure on everyone involved. Meanwhile, the WNBA itself has been clear about one thing: it does not intend to significantly change its stance on revenue sharing. The league's position appears firm, and executives have reportedly indicated that they are not prepared to make major concessions in that area. So if the league isn't moving, and internal disagreements are emerging within the union leadership, that creates a very complicated situation for the players. Because the worst thing that can happen during negotiations is visible division within the group that's supposed to be negotiating as one. That's why the letter from Stewart and Plum immediately attracted so much attention. It suggested that something inside the union wasn't functioning the way it should during one of the most important negotiation periods in the league's history.